Hi, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. So I'm going to start with a little bit of presentation about why we're doing this, because I think right now people talk about no code a lot, but it's important to remember why it actually matters, and not just over the last 6 months. Actually, a real problem we need to work on, and then I'll jump into showing what the product does actually in front of you guys. So the reason why we're doing this is because in the business world and even beyond, engineering is a bottleneck for pretty much everything that people are trying to solve today. A lot of people have ideas, whether it's for themselves personally, to start companies, or inside larger organizations or governments, and they're being bottlenecked by the speed of iteration from the engineering side. The reason is today, in spite of all the initiatives that people have used to try to incentivize people to learn how to code, you have very few people that can write code. It's a very slow process. There is a lot of reinventing the wheel today, if you look at what people are actually doing. And then it's a very slow process to iterate on the product you're trying to build. And so our approach to this is to change how software is built to basically solve those three things. And the way we do that is by changing how people build software. And so now that no code is something that is a little bit familiar to people, it sounds obvious, but when we started in 2012, I can tell you that it was not obvious. Our approach is to change who build software and how we build it through a visual interface. So a no-code system. So I'll show you what it looks like in a few minutes, but it's a platform that takes a little bit of learning. At some point, no-code is still about programming, and that will take you a few hours to learn. But once you've learned how to use Bubble, you can basically build anything, and I'll show you in a second what that means. Like, when I mean anything, it means, Airbnb-type platforms, Facebook, Twitter. One of our users cloned Twitter, for instance, in a few days. All these kind of web applications can be built without writing code. The last thing that's important is we host everything on our platform. If you tell people they can build things without writing code, it's not to tell them they have to handle servers and deployments themselves. So it's a completely off-the-shelf solution where you don't need to worry about these things. The vision we're trying to have here is not a world where coders don't exist anymore. You will still need coders to do things. What we're trying to create is a world where business people or people that are interacting with users, customers, get to build the product that they need, and coders are only involved when something is new. And they extend the platform through features. In our world, we call that plugins. This is a much more efficient way to do things because you stop having this reinventing the wheel, and instead, coders only start working on the truly new features that are needed. And so we're freeing basically a ton of coding time to solve real things. When you see people today, when you see Lyft and Uber, that are both fantastic companies, having all these thousands of engineers, this is really sad because it's essentially the same technical product. So we need to find a way where non-engineers would actually build these products and engineers only work on new things. And that's what Bubble is about. So that's what the product looks like, where people are building a simple application. I'll go pretty quickly on this because I will actually walk you through what that works, how that works in real time. The people we're trying to sell to is essentially anyone that wants to build software without writing code. But we decided from the very early days, so literally 7 years ago, to focus on non-technical founders because they are the ones that I think most deeply need something like Bubble because of the shortage of technical talent. So a non-technical founder or a non-technical founder at a large company, so the kind of entrepreneurs being frustrated with the state of technology that he's using and not being able to have solutions built for him for his problems by the IT department. One of the questions we hear often about no-code is, can that build real thing? Well, let me share a few examples here. Over the 7 years, so we have the advantage of having many years behind us, and so we've seen many use cases. We've had one company that raised more than $300 million that was started on Bubble. Today, it's still running on us, and they've processed over $1 billion of business volume, selling loans to homeowners. So Bubble can scale. Like, the whole point of this is not to create another MVP maker. You start with the MVP on Bubble, obviously, but the goal is to take you along the way, hopefully through, acquisition, IPO, whatever the end means. Another three other companies got into Y Combinator on a Bubble built product, which, if you think about it, is interesting. Y Combinator used to be, if you don't have a technical person on your team, you don't have any chance to get in, and now they're taking, product built on Bubble. So as I said, we're probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest, company starting in this new no-code era. So we started in 2012, bootstrapped for many years. We actually had a pretty non-traditional history in the sense that for 7 years, We just were growing organically, being funded by our customers. And we just raised a round earlier last year in March, sorry, and are now starting to scale the team here in New York. We have 20 people here, and we're actually hiring, not only engineers, but people on the marketing and the support side. So I'd love to talk after this. A few things that we're pretty proud of is we're starting to reach like a certain scale, like 20 million page views on website or web applications hosted on Bubble. So it's starting to reach like an interesting scale. Some of our largest users actually have 1 or 2 million page views a month. The community for us is something very important. As I was saying earlier, there is a learning curve when you learn something like Bubble. And so creating a community where people can help each other is actually critical to your development. And one of the metrics we like tracking is, how fast does it take to get an answer from someone else from the community on our forum that is not by us? And we got to the point where it's consistently less than 10 minutes on a monthly basis, which is something that we're extremely proud of, and that's how we've been able to scale without fundraising, having most of the learning being shared from bubbler to bubbler. And having said that, I'm going to show you how that works. So this is what the interface looks like. So we're looking at, it looks pretty much like PowerPoint. At the end of the day, most of the tools that offer visual programming or no code are going to look like, some productivity tools that people are familiar with, like PowerPoint or Microsoft Excel. And so the way you build it is by defining your visual interface here. So here we're looking at a white page. So that's how open-ended it is. You can do pretty much anything you want. And then you're going to start defining some workflows which will describe how your application should behave when the user interacts with it. So what that means, for instance, is if the user clicks on this button, do this, do this, do that. And so what I was thinking here, what I could do over 10 minutes, something a little bit less so that we can have time for questions, is to build a simple version of Twitter, like a place where people can type tweets and you display tweets below the place where people start tweeting. So the way it works, the way the programming thinking works is by asking yourself first, what does the user need to see? What is the user experience you want to have? Before even thinking, what kind of data structure or anything, we're trying to really start from the user experience and from what the user will interact with. And so what they will interact with, in this case, will be an input where you can type your tweet and the tweet button, which is what I'm going to start doing now. So I'm going to have here an input. I'm going to say what's happening. And then a tweet button. Bubble is extremely open-ended in terms of how it looks. Like you can change pretty much any color or anything. I'll just use this. But for now, I will keep things simple to focus on the functionality first. And then I'm going to say tweet it. So now that I start doing this, there's no, by the way, compilation whatsoever. So whenever you press, preview, you don't need to worry about, compiling, deploying anything. It's all automatic. The whole point, it's truly what you see is what you get, which is really the principle that's governing our design decisions here. And so now I'm going to start thinking about functionality. So the functionality you want to design here in our world, and part of the learning curve is to understand those elementary blocks that we've pre-built to help you do this, is what you want to say is when the user clicks on tweet it, you want to create something in the database that's going to be called a tweet, whose content is going to be whatever was typed in that box. And then for a better user experience, we'll just reset the content of the input. And that's what you do here. So by defining those workflows, workflows is going to be an event that a user has triggered. So there's nothing technical here. Just think about, what do I want to happen when something happens? In this case, when the user clicks on tweet. So you're going to say when an element is clicked, and so the element you pick is the button tweet it, and then you pick action by action where you want to happen. And what happens is with all the libraries that we've built of all these elementary actions, we got now enough coverage where, again, Airbnb.com, Facebook, Twitter, these kind of applications could be built on us without limitation. So what I'm going to do here, one of the most important sections is going to be data. So creating something in the database. I'm going to create something that I will call a tweet. And I'm going to define the tweet as having, for instance, the content field that's going to be a text. And here is the interesting part and the important part. Here what I want to say is the content is going to be whatever was typed by the user when he was using the application. So this is dynamic information. I can't know what it is, but I know where it is. It is in the input saying what's happening. And that's exactly what you see here. So without typing anything, just by pointing and clicking, you can generate those dynamic expressions that will work in run mode. And then I'm going to add one action to reset the input for a better user experience. So now, just by doing that, in fact, I can try something. I'm going to have my first tweet. So clearly something happened here. And what happened is what I told Bubble to do, which is create something and then wipe the input. We're not displaying the input, the tweets yet, below the form like you would have with a Twitter feed, and so that's what I'm going to do now. The point of trying, though, is that the speed of iteration when you're building something is extremely fast, which makes, first of all, learning more fun, and also developing your product much faster compared to writing code, even if you are technical. So the last thing I'll do here, so I'm going to have a list here of all the tweets. So we have a list element here that we call a repeating group that I'm going to put here like this. Again, I'm not going to try to work on the design. And here, I'm just going to say this displays a tweet. And I'm going to search. So here, essentially, for the more technical people in the room, we're doing a query. But I don't like coding it that way. We just prefer saying we're doing a search for all the tweets that we have. And then the last thing is I'm going to populate the cell with the content of the tweet. So here again, we're looking at a situation where what I want to display is a dynamic information. It's not something that I can know, but I know how to describe it theoretically, like in principles. This is a tweet content. And since each cell here has a tweet in its context, you can do something like current cell's tweet content. And just by doing so, let's test again. So the first tweet is here, which is good. And now the second one is showing up here. So there's no compilation whatsoever. This is a real application. If you were to hit that URL on your phone and wanted to type something, it would actually show up. If someone wants to do it, feel free. Going back to the interface, once you understand how to use the different elements we can have on the page, and the power of these workflows here, where you can have literally as many actions as you want, and as many conditions in them as you want, you get to a level of control that is actually extremely code to code. So even though we are a no-code tool, our goal is really to provide as much power as code tools. And today, after 7 years, that's where we are. And now I'm very happy to take some questions. Yes?
What are some security challenges that you had to address in building this? I'm just curious.
So there are the obvious ones, like making sure, especially user data, user type is secure for some tables. There are a few things where we actually have to put the work on the user, because not every application needs to be secure. For instance, if you think about Yelp, the list of restaurants doesn't have to be secure because it's public, but some private information might have to be. And so the way it works is we have a module here that we call privacy, where you would define for each data who can see which data, again, without coding, just by clicking. So this is definitely something extremely important. We do what we can, but we also train our users to force them to think in the terms of privacy, because a lot of the responsibility is going to be on them as well. Yes.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So when I see this, it makes me think, and I want to clarify this and then ask a question. So when I see this, this is like the most amazing baby of Envision, meaning the Anima app and Sketch and GraphQL and all these fun things, right, that you use sort of in these pieces. From that, what happens in two scenarios? What happens if you're working in one of those other frameworks that I spoke to you about, and you wanted to import some of the things, the better things, into this great thing? And then the second part is, in a scenario, and it will not happen, that you guys sort of ceased, right? Can what you're doing here live somewhere else?
So first of all, today, we have on the roadmap to start offering people to import designs from Sketch or Envision or other places like that. We don't have that yet. In practice, it doesn't take as much time as this. What we try to tell people instead, until we have that on the roadmap, which we will, is just start on Bubble and save the few dollars it costs to use these tools. But it's really much the long-term vision, because we want to integrate with everything as much as possible. We don't want to be in our own world. And by the way, we integrate with external things through APIs. You can expose APIs, you can expose your data, you can do a lot of things. Now, for the second question, in the case where we were to go out of business or something like this. So we have made we don't generate code. So it's not like you can take your code and take it somewhere, except if we go out of business, where we made the public commitment that I'm repeating tonight, that is on our website, that if we go out of business, we release everything in open source so that people could run their application on their own servers. Hopefully it doesn't now happen. So we've been profitable most of the life of the company. But that's a guarantee we're making very frequently, and I understand that that's something very important for people. So that's our promise.
Thank you.
Yes.
You said you had an online community and you had a forum, and the response time was about 10 minutes. So
On average, yeah.
are you saying that people help you develop your product, so you're open source?
No, I mean, people extend the platform with plugins, but here it's more people just help each other building things. Like people ask questions. It's like, I can actually show you what that looks like. We haven't open sourced the system. At this stage, we control it. We have exposed the way for people to add plugins, so people would be using this. But here we're really talking about, see, like every few minutes you have people asking questions or helping each other. Yes?
Can you use this to construct an API call process? So if I wanted to get data from, say, the Weather Channel to what I'm building, can I do that?
Yes, if I had a few more minutes, I would show you how that works, because it takes about 5 minutes. But yeah, we have, so first of all, we have a lot of plugins that already exist. We have about like 800 of them. The Weather Channel, I think, is one of them. But if it's not, we have a generic API connector where you would just copy paste the URL, specify which kind of authentication you're using, and then you would be able to use that in Bubble visually. So instead of do a search for, as I just did, you would do get data from API. Yes.
There, put it in the mic, yeah. Sure. Just could you put that back on the screen?
What that?
Put it back on the screen, the plugins and forums.
Should we have time for one more question after this?
Awesome. So it looks, to use Bubble, it's very much like engineer focused, like a lot of the backend part of it. Do you ever focus more on the design side of things and making it easier to use for like a UI designer?
So first of all, most of our users are non-engineers, non-technical, actually. So less than 5% of our engineers write code. Now, we certainly spend more time making sure you could express everything you want on the backend workflows than on the visual part. Effectively, you can do pretty much anything you want visually. We are on our roadmap probably this year to try to make the process a little bit easier. It's not really actually a hard ease of use issue, it's more of a learning issue. Like, it's around responsive settings. I'm aware that this is for people that are already using us. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Once you know how to do it, though, you can do anything, but it takes a few hours to learn, and yes, this is on our roadmap to change. My personal view is that you need to get the backend right first, because that's kind of what has been missing with all the tools that you've seen so far. A lot of people have done tremendous work on the front end. We wanted to focus and innovate on the back end to make sure people could do exactly what they wanted before iterating again on the front end, which we will do this year.
Thanks so much.
Yep. Sure, yep.
I have two short questions. First one, from an engineering perspective, with visual languages, the challenging part is the versioning. So how do you deal with version control?
Mm-hmm.
And the second part is, if I understand it correctly, this is a web app.
Yes.
How do we deal with variants for a mobile version versus a web version?
Yeah. So version control, I actually don't know why visual languages historically have been having issues with version control. I mean, you can go back at any point in time. We have different branches, so if you're on the right plan, you can have literally 15 people working on their own branches and merge them. That would take a little bit of time to create a situation to show you, but it's definitely possible. On the mobile side, yes, I mean, currently we're web applications, responsive, so that works well on mobile. It's hard to know exactly how many because we don't track that, but I think we have like 300 or 400 apps right now in the App Store where users have wrapped them in a wrapper, a hybrid wrapper. It's not something we officially support, and we haven't made the commitment that will always work, but it's actually working pretty well. it's definitely on the roadmap to have a native solution for native applications, like built in-house by us. It's probably for next year, to be honest. All right, thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Thank you, Emmanuel.